Hey listeners, tonight we're doing a little time travel. Forget jet lag. We're heading straight for the pungent, vibrant, and surprisingly bureaucratic world of medieval Europe. Specifically, we're tackling a question that probably never kept you awake. How on earth did they try to stop people from wearing bright colors? Sounds ridiculous, right? Like trying to ban sunshine. But oh, my friend, in the world of wool, woad, and wildly expensive purple dye, it was serious business. A tangled mess of money, power, snobbery, and laws so specific you'd think they were written by a particularly fussy interior decorator with a grudge against rainbows. Imagine rocking up to a 14th century market in your favorite electric blue hoodie. You might not get burned at the stake, but your wallet would definitely feel the heat, and the local fashion police, yes, they existed, might just publicly shame you. You, rocking that unauthorized scarlet, might literally cost an arm and a leg, or at least the monetary equivalent. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video, and subscribe if you like my bedtime story channel. Seriously, no pressure. And while you're pondering that, drop a comment below telling me what city you're listening from, and the exact time on your clock right now. It's always fascinating to see where in the world this little history bubble is popping up. Now, turn off your phone screen, turn down the volume, listen to my storytelling, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Picture this. You wake up, not in your comfy bed, but on a scratchy straw pallet, the air thick. Not just with the usual medieval bouquet of wood smoke, unwashed bodies, and that farmyard undertone. No, this is different. It's acrid, chemical, laced with the tang of ammonia, and something vaguely rotten, sweet. It clings to the back of your throat. Welcome, my chronologically displaced friend, to your first day as a lowly apprentice in a medieval dyehouse. Forget clean labs and safety goggles. Think cramped, dim, steaming sheds, filled with giant, bubbling cauldrons that look like they could double as witches' brew pots. Because, well, functionally they often did. Your master dyer, a man whose hands are permanently stained, the deep, inky blue of a stormy night sky, barks orders. Your job? Haul water. Stoke fires under those terrifying cauldrons. Stir vats of, well, let's just call it organic matter soup, with a pole longer than you are tall. And try not to breathe too deeply, or faint. Honestly, surviving the fumes might be your first major achievement. Forget the plague. Surviving this workplace hazard deserves a medal. So, why all this stinky, back-breaking effort? Because color, my friend, wasn't just pretty. It was power. Literal, tangible, wearable wealth. Forget Bitcoin. The real medieval cryptocurrency was hidden in the threads of your tunic. The most coveted hue? Purple. Not just any purple. We're talking Tyrian purple, the legendary dye squeezed from the glands of thousands upon thousands of tiny sea snails, Murex brandaris for the biology buffs. The process was disgustingly laborious. Crush the snails, extract the tiny gland, expose the slime to sunlight and air, and pray it magically transforms from yellowish goo into that rich, deep, coveted violet red. It took something like 0 snails, to yield a single gram of dye. Let that sink in. No wonder only emperors, popes, and the obscenely wealthy could afford even a trim of genuine Tyrian purple. Wearing it without royal permission? In some places and times, that wasn't just a fine. It was treason. Your life literally depended on the color of your cloak. Talk about high fashion stakes. But it wasn't just the imperial purple that cost the earth. Even the relatively more accessible bright reds, derived from the Kermes insect, tiny bugs scraped off Mediterranean oak trees. Charming. Or the vibrant blues from woad leaves, a plant fermented in human urine for weeks, yes, really, were seriously expensive. Think months of a skilled craftsman's wages for enough dye for one decently bright garment. The dye itself was often worth more than the fabric it colored, or the tailor who stitched it. This is the crucial bit, the foundation of our whole colorful drama. Color equaled cash. Big cash. Wearing bright, saturated hues wasn't just a fashion statement. It was like walking around draped in solid gold bullion. It screamed, "Look at me! I can afford to literally piss away money on this outfit." Or, more likely, "Look at my incredibly rich and powerful patron who paid for this." This inherent, eye-watering expense is why, later on, the powers that be got so twitchy about who wore what. If color was wealth made visible, controlling it was about controlling the very symbols of status and power. But hey, on the bright side, pun intended, as an apprentice, at least you weren't paying for the privilege of smelling like a chemical spill. Your reward? Maybe, just maybe, after years of service, you'd get a scrap of cloth dyed a dull, affordable brown. Lucky you. Now, here's a fun little nugget to ponder as you try not to gag over the dye vat fumes. Ever wonder why depictions of medieval peasants often show them in muddy browns, grays, and undyed wool? It's partly truth, partly myth. While the brightest colors were astronomically expensive, peasants weren't always doomed to drabness. Clever use of locally available cheap plants could yield softer yellows, onion skins, muted greens, fermented bracken, or rusty oranges, madder root. But the intensity, that eye-popping saturation of a true scarlet or deep blue, that remained firmly out of reach for the average plowman. It was a visual class barrier as stark as castle walls. And, speaking of class, your master dyer, despite his vital skill and the precious liquids he commands, probably isn't rolling in Tyrian purple either. He's a craftsman, maybe even part of a powerful guild, but the real profit from that vat of priceless Kermes red, that likely flows upwards to the merchant who imported the dried insect bodies from the Mediterranean, or the noble who commissioned the cloth. The dyer gets paid, sure, but his hands bear the permanent, indelible mark of his trade. Fingers stained deep blue or yellow or brown, a walking advertisement for his craft and a constant reminder of the messy, smelly reality behind the glamour. Historians actually debate how deep these stains penetrated. Were they just surface level, or did they seep right into the skin over a lifetime? Either way, it was a badge of honor and toil you couldn't wash off. Imagine trying to impress a date with woad blue fingernails. Oh, this, just the scent of success, darling. So, as you wipe your brow, leaving a suspiciously greenish smear, haul another bucket of water, and try not to think about what exactly is fermenting in that corner vat, you start to grasp it. This world isn't just black and white, or even 50 shades of gray. It's a world obsessed with color, but color hoarded and controlled by the very top. The sheer effort, the stench, the cost involved in creating even a single bolt of truly vibrant cloth, it makes the idea of someone just waltzing into town wearing sunshine yellow feel like a personal insult, a theft of invisible value. It sets the stage. Why would kings and nobles and city councils start passing laws telling people what colors they couldn't wear? Because that flash of unauthorized crimson on a merchant's wife wasn't just a fashion faux pas. It was a direct challenge, a blurring of the lines, a talking middle finger to the established order where your clothes were, your barcode, instantly telling everyone exactly where you stood or weren't allowed to stand. It threatened the whole visual language of power. And that, my friend, is something the folks in charge simply couldn't tolerate. They needed to keep the rainbow in its designated, hierarchical boxes. But enforcing that? That's where things get really interesting, and where the footsteps of the official color patrol start echoing down your muddy street. You might want to hide that slightly too vibrant scarf. The rhythmic of the fuller's hammers down the street is usually just background noise, like the constant clatter of wooden clogs on cobbles or the distant shouts of the market. But today, it feels ominous. A nervous energy crackles through the damp air of your cramped, timber-framed house. You were just trying to enjoy a lukewarm pottage, mostly turnip, with a hopeful whisper of barley, when it started. First, a sharp, authoritative rap on the heavy oak door that made your spoon clatter into the bowl. Then, voices outside, low and serious, cutting through the usual neighborhood chatter about the price of eggs or Old Man Henrik's gout. Your blood runs a little cold, not from the draft seeping through the wall cracks, but from a chilling sense of knowing. That distinctive rap, it's the sound of the sumptuary law enforcers, the dreaded color patrol. And guess whose modest collection of garments is about to undergo a very invasive, very expensive inspection? You scramble. There's a fleeting, panicked thought about shoving that one vibrant item. Maybe the woolen hose dyed a surprisingly decent crimson with madder root. A gift from your cousin, the aspiring and slightly reckless dyer, under the straw mattress. But it's too late. The door doesn't open slowly. It's pushed with a bureaucratic impatience that brooks no argument. Framed in the doorway isn't a knight in shining armor, but a man whose authority comes from parchment. Not the sword at his hip, though he has one of those too, just in case. He's likely a town clerk or a bailiff's deputy, dressed in sensible, dark, undoubtedly regulation wool. His face is pinched, eyes sharp as a tailor's needle, scanning the dim interior of your single room. He doesn't smile. He carries a wax tablet and stylus, looking profoundly bored, like he's counting turnips, not potential felonies of fashion. Behind him might loom a burlier guard, a silent reminder of the muscle backing up the fashion police. The clerk's gaze sweeps past your meager table, the cold hearth, and lands unerringly on the simple wooden chest in the corner. Your wardrobe. By order of the town council and his lordship, he drones, his voice devoid of inflection, an inspection of attire, pursuant to the statutes concerning excess in apparel and the unauthorized deployment of color. He makes color sound like a contagious disease. This isn't random harassment. Welcome to the bewildering, infuriating world of sumptuary laws. These weren't just about color, but about everything you wore, ate, or even how many guests you could invite to your daughter's wedding. Think of them as the ultimate medieval micromanagers, obsessed with keeping everyone firmly in their divinely ordained, visually identifiable box. But color? Oh, color was their absolute favorite lever of control. Why? Because it was the most visible symbol of wealth and status. The laws were incredibly detailed, often hilariously, or infuriatingly, specific, varying wildly from city to city, kingdom to kingdom. In Florence, you might be forbidden from wearing ermine fur unless you are a knight. In England, under King Edward III, only royalty could wear cloth of gold. In Nuremberg, the laws dictated the maximum value of the buttons a craftsman's wife could wear, and everywhere, color was strictly rationed by social rank. That glorious Tyrian purple? Reserved for emperors, popes, maybe a king if he was feeling particularly papal. Deep crimson from kermes? Probably only for dukes, earls, and the highest tier of the church hierarchy. Bright blues? Maybe for wealthy merchants or lesser nobles, but definitely not for your average baker or weaver. Peasants? You were often legally restricted to the humble palette. Undyed wool, grayish, brown, russet, a muddy red, brown, dark blue. If you could afford the cheaper, less vibrant, woad, black, gray, and white. Wearing a color above your station wasn't just breaking the law. It was seen as a sin against the natural order, a rebellion against God's plan where knights looked like knights and peasants looked like, well, dirt. Now, back to your chest. The clerk gestures impatiently. With trembling hands, hopefully hidden, you lift the heavy lid. The smell of lanolin and faint wood smoke rises. The clerk steps forward, his nose wrinkling slightly. Not at the smell, but in concentration. He doesn't rummage like a thief. He conducts his search with a chilling, methodical precision. He lifts garments one by one. Your everyday tunic, undyed, coarse wool, safe. Your spare hose, a dull brown, safe. Your best cloak for market days, a serviceable, dark blue woad dye, faded but respectable. And crucially, within the legal shade range for your station as, say, a journeyman carpenter. He fingers the fabric, assessing its weight, its quality, but his eyes are laser-focused on the hue. He holds the cloak up to the dim light filtering through the oiled parchment window. Is that blue a fraction too vibrant? Too close to the lapis lazuli shade reserved for the minor gentry? He consults a small, grubby codex he pulls from his belt pouch, the local sumptuary law cheat sheet. This is the moment. The air crackles. Then he gives a barely perceptible nod. Safe. For now. He moves on. A linen undershirt. Undyed. Cream. Safe. A knitted winter cap gray sheep's wool. Safe. You start to breathe again, until his fingers brush against something folded at the very bottom. The madder-dyed hose. That splash of hopeful crimson. His eyes narrow. He unfolds them slowly. The color, even in the gloom, is undeniably richer, redder than your permitted dark blue or brown. It's not Kermes-level scarlet, but it's definitely bright. He doesn't need his codex for this. He looks from the hose to you, his expression shifting from bored to sternly disapproving. Item, he states flatly, stylus poised over his wax tablet. 1 pair hose, woolen, color, red, exceeding permitted saturation and value for declared occupation. He starts writing. This is where the truly bizarre finds kick in. Sumptuary law penalties weren't always about throwing you in the stocks, though that happened, especially for repeat offenders or nobles impersonating royalty. Often, it was financial death by 1,000 cuts, calibrated to sting and humiliate. You might be fined the equivalent of weeks of your wages. The offending garment could be confiscated and publicly destroyed, cut up in the market square as a warning. In some places, you might be forced to donate its monetary value to the poor, adding insult to financial injury. In exceptionally creative jurisdictions, you could be fined per inch of forbidden trim, or charged a fee based on the estimated excess pleasure derived from wearing the illegal hue. Historians chuckle or groan over records of fines for wearing sleeves excessively full or possessing buttons of undue splendor. Your crimson hose, they represent not just a fashion risk, but a potential financial catastrophe. The clerk finishes his note, the scratch of the stylus sounding like coins draining from your purse. The fine will be levied at the Guildhall, payable within the fortnight. He gives the hose one last, disdainful look before dropping them back into the chest like they're contaminated. As the clerk and his silent shadow exit, leaving your door ajar and your wallet feeling significantly lighter, even before the fine is officially calculated, you're left with a mix of anger, fear, and profound resentment. Why this? Why such obsession over the color of your legs? The official line, parroted by preachers and town criers, was moral panic. Bright colors, they thundered, led to vanity, extravagance, and the downfall of society. They encouraged commoners to aspire above their station, blurring God-given distinctions and causing social chaos. It was about preventing ruinous spending on finery, protecting domestic wool industries by banning fancy foreign fabrics, and maintaining the clear, visual hierarchy that kept the medieval world orderly, in theory. But let's be real. Listening to that clerk's retreating footsteps, it was also profoundly about control and cash. The elites couldn't bear the thought of merchants or skilled artisans looking too much like them. It undermined their exclusive status symbols. And those fines? They were a lucrative revenue stream for cash-strapped towns and lords. Confiscated finery could be sold or given as favors. Historians still vigorously debate the real effectiveness of these laws. Were they strictly enforced everywhere, or just sporadically, used as a tool to punish the unpopular or squeeze the newly prosperous? Was the constant reissuing of laws, often with even stricter terms, a sign they worked, or proof that people kept defiantly, stubbornly wearing that illicit red? The evidence is patchy, like a poorly mended tunic. One thing is clear, though. The desire for color, for a bit of brightness in a hard life, was a powerful force. And where there's a law, especially a deeply unpopular one about something as personal as what you wear, you can bet your last silver penny that someone, somewhere, is already figuring out how to break it. Maybe in a hidden room, lit only by a single candle, with the pungent smell of simmering something beginning to mix with the scent of rebellion. You glance towards your neighbor's suspiciously quiet workshop. A faint, unfamiliar, slightly sweet acrid smell seems to drift from under their door. Interesting. The faint, lingering smell of the Color Patrol's disapproval, a mix of damp wool and bureaucratic menace, still hangs in your tiny room, along with the phantom ache of that impending fine. Resentment simmers hotter than the dye vats you apprenticed in. Crimson hose. Really? That's what threatens the very fabric of society? You stare at the offending garment, folded now with a new layer of bitterness. But then, your nose twitches. Cutting through the memory of the clerk's droning voice and the scent of your own fear is that other smell. The one you noticed drifting from your neighbor Greta's workshop just as the patrol left. It's stronger now. Sweet. Like overripe berries, but with an underlying sharpness, almost vinegary. And beneath that, a faint, unsettling hint of ammonia, reminiscent of the Dyehouse, but different. Less industrial, more organic. Like a hidden compost heap working overtime. It's not pleasant exactly, but it smells interesting. It smells like secrets. It smells, against all odds, faintly hopeful. Following your nose, and maybe a rebellious streak, newly sharpened by injustice, you slip out your back door through the narrow, muddy alley where refuse collects and cats patrol, and pause outside Greta's weathered shed. No official sign hangs here, just the smell and the low murmur of voices within. You knock softly, a specific rhythm you've heard others use. The door cracks open just enough for Greta's shrewd, coal-rimmed eye to assess you. She's a widow, known for her sharp tongue and sharper wits, running a small weaving business that somehow always has the most interestingly hued trimmings. Seeing it's you, smelling the lingering anxiety on you like cheap perfume, she gives a curt nod and pulls you inside. The smell hits you like a warm, damp wall. It's the sweet, sharp scent intensified, mixed with the earthy aroma of boiling roots, the tang of fermenting leaves, and yes, the unmistakable pungency of stale urine. Lots of it, collected in large, covered ceramic jars lining one wall. Welcome to the resistance. Welcome to the world of the dye vat guerrillas. Greta's shed is a chaotic alchemist's den, lit by a single guttering tallow candle that throws dancing shadows on bunches of drying weeds, baskets of crushed berries, jars of suspicious powders, and, of course, bubbling pots. This isn't the scale of your old master's operation. This is small, batch, covert, desperate artistry. Here, the goal isn't imperial purple or true Kermes scarlet. That's impossible without the snails or the bugs and the money to buy them. No, the goal here is illusion. It's about tricking the eye and defying the law with whatever the fields, forests, and chamber pots can provide. Right, Greta rasps, handing you a heavy stone mortar and pestle. You look like you could use some defiance. Crush these. She points to a pile of dried, rust-colored roots. Madder root, legal enough on its own, used for duller reds and browns. But Greta's not aiming for dull. Finer, she insists, watching you grind. Like dust, then we mix it with the alum mordant and a little special something. She winks, nodding towards the urine jars. The special something is the open secret of the underground dyer. Stale human urine, collected and fermented for weeks. Why? It's rich in ammonia, which acts as a fantastic pH shifter and helps fix the dye to the wool, making the color brighter and more lasting than just using madder alone. It's cheap, readily available, everyone contributes to the communal jars, and absolutely disgusting. But hey, freedom isn't always pretty. Don't wrinkle your nose, lad. Greta chuckles. That's the smell of victory. Well, victory over drabness anyway, and the bailiff's nose, hopefully. This is the heart of the color rebellion, making forbidden brights from legal sources, using chemistry and sheer ingenuity. Forget expensive imported kerms. Greta's crew uses madder root boosted with urine. Alchemy for reds that approach vibrancy. Need yellow? Forget rare saffron. They throw onion skins, pounds of them, into a pot with alum, yielding surprisingly cheerful golden hues. Craving green? Forget the complicated, and often toxic, verdigris used by the elite. They layer woad blue, fermented woad leaves, another process involving copious urine and thyme, over their onion skin yellow. It's not emerald, but it's a grassy, lively green that won't poison you or cost a year's wages. Blues are trickier. True woad blue is regulated, and achieving real vibrancy without the large-scale fermentation vats is tough. But concentrated solutions, multiple dips, and sheer stubbornness yield deeper blues than the law might technically allow for your station. The results are often less saturated, less color-fast than the real thing. A knockoff scarlet might fade towards pink after a few washes. The green might lean more towards khaki. But in the dim light of a tavern or bustling market, it passes, it gleams. It's a middle finger stitched in wool and dyed with weeds and pea. Here's a gloriously weird tidbit for you, as you stir a pot of simmering onion skins that smells vaguely of soup gone wrong. One of the most sought-after and pungent secrets in the underground dye scene involved a specific lichen, Ochrolechia tartaria, found on rocks in northern Europe and Scotland. When soaked in ammonia, guess where that came from? It produced a beautiful, rich purple-red dye called cudbear. It wasn't Tyrian purple, but it was a stunning, vibrant color, achievable far from the Mediterranean snail beds. The process? Incredibly smelly. The result? Worth the risk and the stench for a splash of near-regal color. Historians still debate how widespread this technique was outside of specific regions like Scotland, where it became known as crodal dyeing. Was it a niche secret, or a more common underground hack? The secrecy makes it hard to pin down, adding to its mystique. The risks are real, though. Stirring Greta's illicit concoction, you feel a thrill laced with fear. Getting caught operating an unlicensed dye operation, especially one producing colors that might be construed as above station, carries penalties far worse than a fine for possessing dyed hose. Fines could be crippling, equipment destroyed, you could be banished from the guilds, lose your livelihood, or even face imprisonment. The smell itself is a giveaway. Neighbors might complain, or blackmail you. The Color Patrol knows these underground operations exist. They sniff for them, literally. That's why ventilation is minimal, why work often happens late at night, why Greta has a bolt hole under a pile of raw fleece in case of unexpected visitors. This isn't just about vanity, it's a calculated risk, a defiant assertion of identity and aspiration. Wearing Greta's rebel red isn't just about looking nice, it's about saying, I exist, I work hard. And I deserve a little joy, a little brightness, even if it's made from roots and chamber pots. It's quiet, smelly, and incredibly brave. As you carefully dip a test swatch of wool into the madder urine brew, watching it bloom into a warm, hopeful red, Greta leans close. "Remember," she whispers, her voice barely audible over the bubbling pot. "The trick isn't just making the color. It's wearing it without flaunting it. A flash of lining, a vibrant purse, a hatband. Small victories." She grins, a flash of defiance in her eyes. "Let them waste their time looking for full gowns. We'll paint the town, one stolen splash of color at a time. The wool in your hand feels warm, damp, and vibrantly, illegally alive. It feels like possibility, dyed in defiance." The memory of grinding madder root and the eye-watering tang of Greta's workshop fades, replaced by the surprisingly sweet scent of beeswax candles and the warm, yeasty aroma of freshly baked bread. You're not hunched over a dye vat. You're standing in the small, packed hall of the village tavern, pressed shoulder to shoulder with neighbors. Lanterns cast flickering golden light on faces flushed with anticipation and cheap ale. Music, a lively, slightly off-key tune from a pipe and tabor, fills the air. Laughter rings out. It's Alara's wedding day. Alara, the miller's daughter, whose smile could light up the grayest market day. You helped spin the wool for her bridal gown, and, in a moment of shared defiance fueled by Greta's expertise, you'd bartered 3 days of your carpentry labor for enough of that carefully secretly boosted madder dye to color the bodice, and sleeves a deep, warm, unmistakably vibrant red. It was a gift, a secret splash of rebellion woven into her happiness. Standing near the back, you watch as the door to the side chamber opens. Alara steps into the hall. A hush falls, broken only by a collective intake of breath. She looks radiant. The gown is simple in cut, good wool, well tailored. But the color. Oh, the color. The candlelight catches the rich red of the bodice, making it glow like banked embers against the paler wool of the skirt. It's not the jewel-like, impossibly expensive crimson of a countess, born of crushed kermes insects. It's warmer, earthier, born of roots and ingenuity. But in this humble hall, surrounded by drab browns, greens, and blues, it shines. It's a declaration, a gasp of pure, unadulterated beauty. Alara beams, her cheeks flushed with joy and the significance of the moment. Her groom, Tomas, a sturdy wheelwright, looks at her with pure adoration. For a heartbeat, it's perfect. A stolen moment of pure, colorful joy. Then, you see it. Over by the hearth, standing slightly apart from the jostling crowd, is Mistress Agatha, wife of the local bailiff. Dressed impeccably, as always, in the legally sanctioned deep blue reserved for the wives of minor officials. Her gown is finer wool than Alara's, trimmed with subtle and legally permitted gray fur. But the color? Dutiful, respectable, dull. Her face, usually a mask of composed superiority, has frozen. Her lips are pressed into a thin, bloodless line. Her eyes, sharp as a hawk's, are fixed not on Alara's joyful face, but on the red of her bodice. You see the calculation flicker there. The quality of the wool, acceptable for a miller's daughter. The cut, modest. But the color, the vibrancy, it's a transgression. A visible challenge to the delicate, fragile hierarchy that places Mistress Agatha's deep blue firmly above Alara's Miller family russet. It's not jealousy of beauty. It's panic at the blurring of lines. That red isn't just a color, it's a social grenade, and Alara just pulled the pin by walking into the room. The music stutters, then stops. The laughter dies. The warm tavern air suddenly feels thick and cold. Mistress Agatha doesn't shout. Her voice, when it cuts through the silence, is low, icy, and carries the weight of her husband's authority. A vibrant choice, Ilara. The word vibrant drips with disdain. One might almost mistake it for crimson. She lets the implication hang, heavy and poisonous. Tomas steps forward, his face darkening. It's matter dye, Mistress Agatha. Well within our means. Agatha's smile is thin and humorless. Is it? The shade seems remarkably intense for simple matter, almost valuable. She turns her gaze slowly, deliberately, scanning the crowd. It lands on you for a fraction of a second, long enough to feel like an accusation. Does she know? Suspect? Or is she just casting a wide net of suspicion? One wonders, she continues, her voice smooth as poisoned honey, where such a potent color might have been procured. The regulations on dyestuffs and their application are quite clear. For the preservation of order, the unspoken threat hangs in the air. Your wedding feast could become an inquest. The damage is done. The joyous unity of the celebration shatters. Whispers erupt, sharp and anxious. Neighbors glance at each other, then at Ilara's red bodice, then quickly away. Some faces show sympathy, a shared understanding of the unfairness. Others show disapproval, fearing association with potential trouble. Others, like the baker whose wife was fined for overly elaborate sleeves last year, look almost grimly satisfied. The carefully maintained facade of community harmony cracks wide open, exposing the raw nerves of class anxiety and hypocrisy beneath. This is what the sumptuary laws were really about, beyond the moralizing and the revenue. Enforcing visibility, breeding suspicion, and weaponizing envy. Mistress Agatha doesn't wear her blue because she particularly loves it. She wears it as a badge of her distance from the Ilaras of the world. Ilara's red, achieved through cleverness and risk, bridges that distance visually. It suggests that the difference isn't ordained by God, but by money, access, and arbitrary rules. Rules the Agathas of the world benefit from. The hypocrisy is breathtaking. Everyone knows the wealthy flout these laws constantly. A richer merchant's wife might wear deeper blues or subtle purples smuggled in from abroad, relying on bribes or the enforcer's selective blindness. But they do it quietly, behind closed doors, maintaining the illusion of conformity. Ilara wore her defiance openly at her own wedding, radiating happiness. That was her real crime. Here's the cold, hard historical truth underpinning this awkward silence. Color was the most immediate, undeniable social signifier. In a world without ID cards or credit scores, your clothes were your passport, your credit rating, your social security number, all rolled into one visually immediate package. A knight looked like a knight. A serf looked like a serf. A merchant's wife looked like a merchant's wife. This visual shorthand kept the complex machinery of feudal society running, in theory. Ilara's red bodice short-circuited that. It asked uncomfortable questions. If a miller's daughter can look this notable, what truly separates her from the wife of a bailiff? Is it inherent worth? Or just better access to dyestuffs and a willingness to break stupid rules? It exposed the insecurity at the heart of the elite, the fear that their status rested on flimsy foundations of tradition and enforced visual difference, not inherent superiority. Historians fiercely debate how much social mobility these laws actually prevented versus just channeling it into less visible avenues. Did they freeze the class structure, or just force ambition underground? The sheer volume of laws passed and repassed, often with escalating penalties, screams of elite panic, a sign the visual barriers were constantly being breached, in spirit if not always in blatant, wedding dress-wearing fact. The rest of the feast is a tense, hollow affair. The music starts again, but the joy is forced. People dance, but their eyes dart nervously. Alara's red bodice, once a beacon of celebration, now feels like a target. Tomas stays close, protective, radiating anger. Mistress Agatha departs early, her point made, the poison sown. As you slip out into the cool night air, the raucous sounds of the feast muffled behind you, the weight of the encounter settles. It wasn't just about a dress. It was a skirmish in a silent war, fought with dye stuffs and dress codes. The red wool wasn't just thread, it was a battle standard. And while Mistress Agatha might have won this round, casting a pall over the wedding, you feel a strange certainty. The desire for color, for self-expression, for a tiny piece of the beauty reserved for the few, it's not going away. It's simmering, like Greta's dye pots, beneath the surface. Change feels distant, abstract, until a chilling new whisper starts circulating in the market square a few weeks later. A whisper that has nothing to do with colors, and everything to do with ships docking from the east, carrying a far darker, more universal threat. A whisper about a sickness that doesn't care about the color of your tunic, only the beating of your heart. The rigid world obsessed with policing red bodices is about to get a shock that makes sumptuary laws look like trivial nonsense. The whispered fear that momentarily overshadowed Mistress Agatha's poisonous glare at Alara's wedding, the rumors of a distant, terrifying sickness, didn't stay whispers for long. It became a roar. A suffocating, all-consuming darkness that swept through the land not in months, but in brutal, unforgiving weeks. The Black Death. It didn't creep, it exploded. One day, the market buzzed with nervous talk of feverish sailors in the port city a week's ride away. The next, Old Man Henrik was coughing blood onto his prized cabbages. Then the tanner's children. Then the priest. The neat, meticulously policed social order, where the color of your hose could spark a legal battle, dissolved into sheer primal terror. Suddenly, the only color that mattered was the livid purple of buboes swelling under arms and groins, the stark white of fear on every face, and the relentless, final black of the grave carts rumbling through streets, eerily silent, but for the rasping coughs and the desperate prayers echoing from shuttered windows. You survive. Barely. By some grim twist of fate, or perhaps your constitution hardened by years of hauling dye vats and breathing questionable fumes. But survival leaves you standing in a world utterly transformed. The familiar village landscape is a skeletal remnant. Half the houses stand empty, doors hanging open like broken jaws. Fields lie fallow, choked with weeds. The mill wheel is still. The constant thrum of life, the clatter, the chatter, the market cries, is replaced by a hollow, aching silence. The stench of death, though fading, lingers like a bad memory in the damp corners of buildings. The sheer scale of loss is incomprehensible. It's not just numbers on a parchment. It's faces missing from the well, voices silent at the tavern, skills vanished overnight. Your old master dyer? Gone. The pinched-faced clerk who finds you for the crimson hose? Gone. Mistress Agatha and her bailiff husband? Gone. The rigid structures that held their power, that enforced the blue over red hierarchy, shattered like rotten timber. In this broken, grieving world, the sumptuary laws don't just feel absurd, they feel obscenely irrelevant. Trying to enforce rules about matter-red intensity when there aren't enough hands to bury the dead, when entire villages stand abandoned, when the very concept of station has been drowned in a sea of mortality, it's like arguing about the arrangement of deck chairs on the Titanic after it sank. The surviving authorities, town councils decimated, manorial lords scrambling to find anyone to work their depleted lands, simply lack the manpower, the will, and the moral authority. Who cares if a surviving weaver, her family wiped out, wears a bright yellow kirtle dyed with extra onion skins? Who has the time the energy, or the spare enforcers to check. The old visual code is meaningless. A peasant who inherited a deserted freehold might now wear a slightly better tunic. A merchant who lost his rivals might suddenly afford a splash of previously forbidden color. The lines are irreparably blurred, not by defiance, but by catastrophic depopulation and economic necessity. Workers are scarce. Skills are gold dust. If you're a surviving dyer, a carpenter, a blacksmith, your value is skyrocketed. You can demand higher wages, better conditions, and maybe, just maybe, a nicer cloak. The old elites who clung to color as their exclusive badge are either dead or desperately trying to lure you to their depleted estates with promises that would have been unthinkable before the plague. Suddenly, your labor, not your lineage, dictates your worth. And part of that worth might just manifest in the color you choose to wear. And then, cutting through the lingering gloom like a shaft of actual sunlight, come the new dyes. News trickles in with the cautiously returning merchant ships. Not just news of survival elsewhere, but of colors. From the east, via the bustling, resilient ports of Italy and the Ottoman realms, come tales, and soon samples, of dyes that change the game. Brazil wood. Not from Brazil yet, but from Asia. A deep, rich, relatively affordable red that puts even boosted matter to shame. Indigo. The real deal, not woad. A blue so deep and vibrant, it's like capturing a piece of the midnight sky itself, far superior to the best fermented woad, and achievable, with less stench and effort, though still complex. It floods the markets, carried by merchants eager to sell anything to a population starved not just for food, but for beauty, for hope, for a sign that life can be more than survival. Suddenly, achieving stunning colors isn't just the realm of snails, rare bugs, or illicit underground urine labs. The monopoly held by the old, expensive sources, the very monopoly that underpinned the elite's exclusive claim to certain hues, is irrevocably broken. The genie is out of the bottle, and it's dyed brilliant red and blue. The change isn't overnight, and it's not universal. Old habits, old prejudices, die hard. Some conservative nobles or churchmen might still grumble about excess or vanity. But the tide has turned. You walk through a market square a few years after the worst has passed. It's still quieter than before, but the buzz is returning. And the colors? They hit you. Not just the drab survival tones, but flashes of vibrant Brazilwood red on a merchant's wife's sleeve, a stunning indigo blue scarf on a prosperous farmer, a rich green, achieved more easily now by over-dyeing indigo with welled yellow, on a young woman laughing with friends. The underground dyers like Greta haven't vanished. They've adapted. They might be using the new dyes legally now, or mixing them with their old tricks. The obsession with policing color fades, replaced by a desperate need to rebuild, to trade, to live. The laws might technically linger on dusty scrolls for decades, but they are ghosts, ignored and unenforced. The energy once spent on wardrobe raids is now channeled into rebuilding walls, replanting fields, restocking workshops. The rigid, color-coded hierarchy, dealt a mortal blow by the plague's indiscriminate scythe, and finished off by economic upheaval and dazzling new dyes, crumbles. What rises in its place is messier, noisier, and undeniably brighter. You spot a flash of familiar, warm red in the crowd. Alara, holding a toddler, her smile back, her gown a respectable but cheerful madder hue, walking unremarked beside Tomas. No icy glares follow her today. The world has moved on. The rainbow, long suppressed, is finally, joyously, erupting. The echoes of the market square, vibrant with once forbidden hues, gently soften now, like dyes dissolving into clear water. The frantic energy of the dyer's vat, the sharp rap of the law enforcer, the gasps of a scandalized wedding feast. They all recede, fading into the deep, velvety quiet of this moment. Think of those colors not as cloth anymore, but as swirls in the air around you, the deep, sighing indigo of the night sky outside your window, the soft, warm, madder-red glow behind your closed eyelids, the gentle, earthy ochre of the candlelight's last flicker, if you've left one burning low. The strict rules, the fierce anxieties, the desperate struggles of that distant time, they feel weightless now, like motes of dust caught in a moonbeam. You've journeyed through the stink and the splendor, the injustice and the ingenuity. You felt the scratch of undyed wool and the illicit thrill of rebel red. You witnessed how darkness fell, indiscriminate and terrifying, and how stubbornly, wonderfully human beings reached again for light, for color. That yearning itself feels like a soft pulse in the quiet, a reminder of resilience woven into our very being. Let the images soften at the edges, blending like watercolors on damp paper, the bubbling vats becoming gentle streams, the sumptuary scrolls curling into feathery ash, the harsh voices murmuring into a distant lullaby sung by the wind. There are no more patrols here, no more boundaries in this drifting space. Just the gentle ebb and flow of breath, the comforting weight of blankets, the slow, steady beat of your own heart, a quiet rhythm beneath the vast, star-dyed tapestry of the night. The story settles around you, not as history, but as a dream of persistence, a whispered assurance that even after the deepest shadows, color finds a way back. Rest now. Let the quiet hold you. Let the soft darkness be your cloak. All is calm. All is gently done.